Well, I've worked with endangered languages before. I did a project with click languages in the Kalahari Desert. And so I wanted to do another endangered language project. And I looked to indigenous languages in Canada because I felt a huge gap in my own knowledge about indigenous issues in this country. I grew up here, but I haven't lived here for a good 20 years. And when I was growing up, Canadian history didn't really give much time to Indigenous history, which is, I felt, kind of the real history of Canada, which I was completely sort of missing, really. And I thought working with an endangered language in Canada would give me an opportunity to learn firsthand some of the issues that Indigenous people deal with here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the point of interest here is about old language from Moldova, Somalia.
Some of the recordings that we made were specific to the kind of elicitations that Tyler Peterson, the linguist, was wanted to get for his study of modality in the Gitsan language. But both of us were quite interested, both in terms of contributing to archive material, but also for our own interest and our own work. In just getting people to say whatever it is they wanted to say. So in terms of the materials that I wanted, I didn't really have an agenda or want people to speak about specific things. We just sort of said, what would you like to say in Gitsanamuk? And in some cases it was things that maybe they felt important for their children or their families to hear in their own language. In other cases, more general things about the language of the culture. In still other cases, very specific personal stories, almost always told with a great sense of humor. And I think the humor that we experienced in working with people in Kispiox is something that I wanted to convey through the work, because I think the kind of a sense of kind of sadness, I think, or imperialist nostalgia, which I think some work is guilty of, and perhaps some of my work in the past as well, I think is something that needs to be questioned, and I hope that I've kind of incorporated some of the humor that people approach these things with into the piece. Doing it here at this particular Museum of Anthropology, where I think questions are being raised about the nature of collections, and this work and my previous work with click languages, I think in some ways kind of problematizes, or at least questions, the ethnographic gaze and the relationship between cultures that are being studied and in many cases studied constantly, and that's a source of frustration and in some cases anger amongst indigenous people. But I think in some ways I've tried to incorporate those relationships and those issues within the work itself. So both through Denise's photographs and through the way I've worked with the sound, and the way I've chosen to print the photographs, and the relationship between the images with the person in them, with the person absent, with the recording equipment, which is kind of a technological kind of, in some senses a barrier, in some senses a kind of conduit for communication between, on either side of the sort of people being studied or looked at and recorded, and those doing the studying and looking at, whether they're anthropologists, linguists, or in my case artists. My work with endangered languages tends to have multiple purposes. So the materials that I gather are not just for my work as an artist, but I also want them to perform other functions, one of which is to provide something for the community itself. So Tyler Peterson, the linguist that I worked with, and I are putting together an archive of all the materials that we gathered. That's photographs, video, and sound recordings. And we're putting together an archive that will reside in the community. Also, the materials that we gathered are part of an archive in London of endangered languages that is part of the Hans Rausing Endangered Languages Project. Well, taking into account differing audiences for the work is just one of the things that that makes me tend to work quite slowly on projects like this. I mean, one of the things is that I feel a certain responsibility to the people who've kind of entrusted me with their voices and their stories. On the other hand, I want to sort of have a certain artistic freedom and do kind of what I consider interesting things with the sounds and with the language. So finding kind of ways that I feel are responsible and respectful is something that takes a long time to work out in kind of discovering how I'm going to work with materials. To me, it's important to show the work local to where it was, where the materials were gathered, because it will have quite different meanings, I think, to people who are from the area, even if they don't speak a great deal of Gisanamuk. I think knowing some of the people and hearing some of the stories and hearing them in Gisanamuk will be quite a significant thing there. There's a lot of sound art that over the years that kind of takes voices and jumbles them up, and you can't really understand them and things. And I think, first of all, I think that's been done a lot, and second of all, I think as kind of out of respect for the language and the people, I really wanted the voices to be clearly heard. But the environmental sounds I felt a bit freer to kind of play with, and again, the kind of subjective side of it, that I could kind of do what it is I do a lot of the time as a sound artist, which is manipulate sound and play with them. So I haven't added any other sounds. What I've done is taken the environmental sounds and in some cases stretched them out, sometimes filter them, sometimes just resonate certain frequencies so that they become these kind of long, almost stretched out tones at times. And in that way I kind of take the piece and move it from kind of a documentation into a sort of abstraction. And a lot of my work deals with that kind of border between documentation and abstraction.